The first time I noticed something was off, it was on the morning of December 1st, a day like any other, or so it seemed. Winter had arrived as it always did, blanketing the world in a sheet of white that seemed to muffle the sounds of life itself. The streets were quiet, save for the occasional car slicing through the snow, and the air was crisp, biting at any exposed skin with a sharpness that was almost exhilarating. My routine was simple, predictable even. Every day, I would rise just before dawn, pull on my heavy coat, and make the short trek to the small cafe at the corner of Maple and Fifth. There, amidst the chatter of early risers and the rhythmic grinding of coffee beans, I'd sit by the window, a steaming mug warming my hands, watching the world wake up around me. It was on such a morning that I first saw him, the man with glassy eyes. He stood across the street, partially obscured by swirling flurries, motionless as a statue. His presence was unsettling in its stillness, as if he were carved from the very ice that coated the world around us. Something in his stance, the way he seemed detached from the bustling life around him, sent a ripple of unease through me. But life, with all its demands and distractions, quickly drew my attention away, and by the time I glanced back, he was gone. The days slipped by, each one mirroring the last, as December unfolded with its usual mix of festive cheer and the frenetic rush that preceded the holidays. I found myself caught up in the familiar whirlwind of obligations and traditions, the office party with its obligatory small talk, the gift shopping that escalated into a scavenger hunt through crowded stores, and the annual family gathering that always seemed to end in a tangle of frayed nerves and unspoken grievances. The glassy-eyed man appeared sporadically, a spectral figure in the periphery of my vision. Sometimes, I'd catch a glimpse of him reflected in a shop window as I hurried past. Other times, he'd be standing just outside the cafe as I left, his gaze fixed somewhere beyond me, into a distance only he could see. It became a game of sorts, spotting him amidst the crowd, a peculiar constant in the ever-shifting panorama of city life. It wasn't until mid-December that the first disturbance occurred. I awoke one morning, the chill of the room seeping into my bones, to find that I had no memory of the previous day. It was as if someone had taken an eraser to my life, leaving only smudged traces where a full picture should have been. Panic clawed at my insides as I rushed through my morning routine, hoping that familiarity would anchor me. At the cafe, the barista greeted me with the same cheerful nod. The regulars occupied their usual spots, and the world carried on as if nothing had changed. Yet something had shifted. The glassy-eyed man was there again, standing by the lamppost across the street. This time, when our eyes met, a shiver ran through me. His gaze was penetrating, as though he could see beyond the layers of reality itself, into the cracks where time might slip through. I blinked, and he was gone, leaving behind a lingering sense of disquiet. As the days continued to pass, this sensation of dislocation only grew stronger. I began to notice subtle discrepancies in my surroundings, details that felt both familiar and foreign. A shop that seemed out of place, a face in the crowd that was both known and unknown, and the ever-present glassy-eyed man, who now seemed to follow me everywhere, his presence a silent specter at the edge of my awareness. I confided in no one, fearing their dismissal or worse, their concern. Instead, I sought solace in the mundane, throwing myself into work and social obligations with a fervor born of desperation. But the facade of normalcy was fragile, and beneath it lay a world slowly unraveling. I was trapped in a loop, a cycle of days that refused to progress, and each morning brought with it a chilling sameness that set my nerves on edge. Christmas Eve arrived as a crescendo of tension and artificial cheer. The city was alight with decorations, windows framed in twinkling lights, and the streets bustling with last-minute shoppers. That evening, I joined my family for our traditional dinner, the house filled with the comforting aroma of roast and the soft strains of holiday music. Yet beneath the veneer of celebration, an undercurrent of unease lingered. As I stood by the window, watching the snow fall softly against the glow of street lamps, I felt a presence beside me. I turned, half expecting to see the glassy-eyed man standing there, but found only my reflection, eyes wide with dread. It was then that I realized the truth. I was caught in an eternal December, a month repeating itself in an unending loop, each day a pale imitation of the last, its edges fraying and distorting with each iteration. The glassy-eyed man was no mere figment, but an entity of this endless cycle, a guardian, or perhaps a warden, of this twisted reality. I understood now that his gaze held no malice, only melancholy, as if he too were trapped in this liminal space between moments, bound to watch as the world turned in on itself. Desperation clawed at my sanity, driving me to seek a way out of this temporal prison. I spent countless nights poring over books of lore and theory, searching for some explanation, some key to unlock the door of time. But the answers eluded me, like whispers on the wind, and each morning I awoke to find myself back at the start, the calendar forever paused on December 1st. As the days blurred into one another, my grip on reality began to slip. I found myself losing track of time, unable to distinguish between what was real and what was illusion. I wandered the city in a daze, a ghost among the living, my senses heightened to the point of distortion. The faces around me grew indistinct, their features melting into one another like wet paint. The glassy-eyed man was always there, a silent sentinel amidst the chaos, his presence both a comfort and a curse. I felt him watching, waiting for something I could not fathom. His eyes, once unnerving, now seemed to hold a quiet understanding, a shared suffering in our perpetual December. In a moment of clarity, I approached him, my breath frosting in the cold air as I crossed the street to where he stood. Up close, he seemed less otherworldly, more human, and I saw in his eyes a reflection of my own despair. "Why?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper, carried away by the wind. He did not answer, not with words at least. Instead, he gestured to the city around us, to the people moving through their scripted lives, oblivious to the loop that ensnared them. In that gesture, I understood the futility of my struggle, the inescapable nature of the cycle. Acceptance was the only escape, the only way to find peace within the confines of this repeating month. I stood there, the snow falling gently around us, and for the first time, I felt a sense of calm wash over me. The glassy-eyed man nodded, a silent acknowledgement, and as I turned to walk away, I felt his presence recede, leaving behind a quiet void. The days continued to turn, each one a repetition, but now I moved through them with a new awareness. I found beauty in the small moments, the gentle rise of the sun, the laughter of children playing in the snow, the warmth of a stranger's smile. The world, though unchanged, seemed brighter, more vivid, and I realized that while the loop remained unbroken, my perception of it had shifted. Each morning, I would rise with the dawn, savoring the stillness before the city awakened. I would take my usual place by the window at the cafe, cradling a mug of coffee as I watched the world unfold. The glassy-eyed man was still there, a part of the scenery, a reminder of the mystery that lay beyond the surface of my life. Yet the fear lingered, a shadow at the edge of my consciousness, whispering of the unknown, of the eternity that stretched before me. It was a fear tempered by acceptance, by the knowledge that though I walked this path alone, I was not truly alone. In the glassy-eyed man, I had found a companion, a witness to my journey through the endless December, and so I continue, caught in this cycle of time, each day a reflection of the last, each moment an echo of eternity. The glassy-eyed man remains, a constant presence in the ever-repeating dance of reality, his eyes a window into the depths of time itself, where the past and future swirl together in an unending waltz. December 13th, 2022, dawned with the same pale, reluctant light it always did, the kind that barely crested the horizon before being swallowed by the dense, unyielding clouds above. I awoke, as I had done each day for what felt like eternity, in the narrow confines of my small bedroom, where the persistent chill clung stubbornly to the air, never fully dissipated by the meager warmth of the ancient radiator. I lay there for a while, watching the breath escape my lips in faint wisps, contemplating the futility of my existence. For 1,506 days, each identical to the last, I had relived December 13th, 2022. The same cold, the same muted light filtering through the curtains, and the same mechanical beep of the alarm that always seemed to mock my inability to change the course of this seemingly endless loop. My routine was a ritual of normalcy. Shower, breakfast, a glance at the newspaper headline that never changed. Winter storm approaches as year nears end. Each day began with a reluctant acceptance of this monotonous reality. I would dress in the same clothes, a cozy sweater with jeans, and head out into the biting air, my breath trailing behind me like a ghost, disintegrating almost as soon as it appeared. The town was always the same, each face I passed wearing the same expressions, locked in a moment that never moved forward. People were cordial, even friendly, but their conversations were echoes of a day long settled into the past. The first disturbance came unbidden, slipping into the cracks of my consciousness like an unwelcome draft. It was subtle at first, the nagging sensation that something was slightly off, like a painting hung just a fraction askew. I felt it as I walked to the cafe where I spent my mornings, a comforting ritual that had become a lifeline amidst the repetition. The barista, a cheerful young woman named Clara, always placed my coffee on the counter with a smile and a nod. But today was different. Her smile wavered, her eyes lingered on mine a beat too long, as if searching for something hidden beneath the surface. I dismissed it as an aberration, a momentary lapse in the script that governed our shared existence. But the feeling persisted, growing like a shadow that lengthens with the setting sun. As the day unfolded, small inconsistencies began to surface, tiny fractures in the facade of normalcy. The newspaper headline remained unchanged, but the paper itself felt heavier in my hands, the ink darker, more pronounced. People on the street seemed more hurried, their movements brisk, as if they sensed the encroaching storm beyond the weather forecast. Escalation crept in incrementally, a soft crescendo that built upon itself with each passing hour. By afternoon, I found myself standing at the intersection of Main and Fifth, watching as the same red sedan drove past for the third time in as many minutes. Its driver, a man with a perpetually furrowed brow, glanced my way, his eyes meeting mine with a fleeting recognition that sent a shiver coursing down my spine. The air seemed to hum with an energy I couldn't name, vibrating with the tension of an unseen storm. The unease gnawed at my consciousness, a relentless tide that refused to ebb. I returned home that evening, the familiar creak of the floorboards beneath my feet, a small comfort in the growing uncertainty. As I prepared dinner, the knife slipped, nicking my finger, a minor injury, unremarkable in its occurrence. Yet the sight of the blood, vivid and startling against the stark white of the bandage, left me with a profound sense of foreboding. The climax arrived not with a bang, but with the quiet insistence of a whisper, barely discernible above the din of my racing thoughts. I awoke the following morning, the 1507th day, to find the world outside my window transformed. The storm that had loomed in the forecast had arrived overnight, blanketing the town in a thick, suffocating silence. The snow lay heavy and unbroken, a pristine sheet unmarred by footprints or tire tracks. The streetlights, usually flickering, were now ominously dark, casting long shadows that seemed to stretch beyond their natural length, as if reaching for something just out of sight. There was a stillness, a profound hush that settled over everything, as if the world itself had paused, holding its breath in anticipation. Stepping outside, I was struck by the absence of sound, the snow absorbing every noise until only the soft crunch of my footsteps remained. I wandered aimlessly, a solitary figure wrapped in layers, against the cold, my breath a steady rhythm in the frozen air. It was then that I heard it, a faint echo, a melody that drifted on the wind, haunting and achingly familiar. I followed the sound, drawn by an invisible thread that led me through the empty streets, past the darkened windows of the town. My heart pounded in my chest, driven by a compulsion I couldn't resist, until I stood before the source. A small, unassuming house at the edge of town, its windows aglow with the warm light of a fire within. The door creaked open with a reluctance that mirrored my own hesitation. Inside, the warmth enveloped me, a stark contrast to the chill outside. The room was filled with the soft notes of a piano, each keystroke resonating with a melancholy I felt deep within my bones. At the center of the room sat a figure, their back turned to me, fingers dancing across the keys with a grace that spoke of years of practice. I watched, transfixed, as the music swelled, filling the space with an emotion that was at once familiar and foreign. The figure turned slowly, their face obscured by shadow. But I knew, somehow, I knew that they shared my plight, trapped in this endless loop, reliving the same day over and over. Our eyes met, and in that moment, a silent understanding passed between us, a connection that transcended the constraints of time. The lingering fear settled in as the music faded, leaving only the echo of its memory in the stillness. I returned home, my mind a whirlwind of questions without answers, my thoughts a tangled web of uncertainty. The day ended as it always did, with the soft embrace of sleep drawing me into its depths, promising a respite from the weight of my existence. And yet, as consciousness slipped away, I felt the familiar pull of the cycle beginning anew. December 13th dawned once more, the pale light breaking over the horizon with a reluctant inevitability. The world remained unchanged, a reflection of what it had always been, yet the seeds of doubt had been sown, their roots inexorably entwined with my own. I rose from bed, the chill of the room a reminder of the reality I could not escape. The loop continued, unbroken, but within me lay the knowledge that something had shifted, a crack in the facade that hinted at the possibility of change. The haunting melody of the piano lingered at the edges of my mind, a testament to the truth hidden beneath the surface of this perpetual day. As I stepped into the world once more, I carried with me the weight of that understanding, the knowledge that I was not alone. The fear remained, a constant companion, but it was tempered by the hope that perhaps one day I might find a way to break free from the confines of this December 13th, to step beyond the shadow of this endless loop and into the light of a new beginning. The day began like any other, ordinary and unassuming. The sun fought its way up through a blanket of thick gray clouds, painting the suburban neighborhood in a dull, muted light. My alarm clock buzzed monotonously at 7:00 a.m., pulling me from a sleep littered with fragmented dreams that evaporated as I opened my eyes. The house smelled of coffee, and the distant hum of life outside seeped through the walls. I rolled out of bed, the cool floorboard sending a shiver up my spine, and padded softly to the kitchen. My wife, Sarah, stood by the counter, her back to me as she prepared breakfast. She hummed a tune I couldn't quite place, her movements rhythmic and precise. The air was rich with the aroma of fried eggs and toast. Our son, Ethan, sat at the table, swinging his legs absent-mindedly as he spooned cereal into his mouth, with the enthusiasm only children possess in the early hours. As I settled into my usual chair, I couldn't shake off a peculiar feeling of déjà vu. Every click of the spoon, every note of Sarah's hum felt like echoes from a past I couldn't fully grasp. Brushing it aside as remnants of sleep, I reached for the morning paper, the crinkling of pages a comforting sound, grounding me in the present. The day flowed as expected. I left for work, the office a monotonous gray expanse filled with the hum of computers and the distant chatter of colleagues. I was trapped in a cycle of meetings and reports, the hands of the clock dragging lazily through the hours. By the time I returned home, the sky had darkened, the day slipping into the folds of evening. Dinner was a quiet affair, punctuated by Ethan's stories from school and the gentle clinking of cutlery against plates. Exhausted, I fell into bed, sleep claiming me almost immediately. But when I awoke the next morning, the world seemed slightly off kilter. My alarm rang again at precisely 7:00 a.m., a jarring reminder of the day's routine. Yet, as I moved through the motions of morning, a chilling sense of repetition settled in. The same song hummed by Sarah, the identical sway of Ethan's legs. Even the news on the radio was eerily familiar. This time, there was no dismissing the sensation as mere imagination. The world around me had taken on a surreal quality, a loop of events playing repeatedly. The day unfolded in an uncanny mirror of the one before. I was a character trapped in a story written by an unseen hand, the script unchanging. With each dawn, the cycle persisted, my days sliding seamlessly into one another. The realization sank in with quiet horror. I was ensnared in a ceaseless loop, an endless Groundhog Day of despair. I grappled with the unsettling truth, each repeat more confounding than the last, eroding the boundaries of sanity. I attempted to break the cycle with desperate measures. Routes were altered, conversations forced into new directions, yet the outcome remained stubbornly unchanged. It was as if I was bound by invisible chains, every effort to escape leading me back to the starting point. The days turned darker with my growing awareness of the situation's permanence. A week passed, then another, but the loop remained unbroken. My once familiar neighborhood became a stage for torment, the repetition transforming mundane events into a tapestry of psychological duress. One evening, as rain tapped softly against the windows, Sarah caught my gaze, her eyes mirroring my own frustration. "Are you all right?" she asked, her voice a thread of concern knitting the silence between us. "I'm fine," I replied, though my voice betrayed me, cracking under the weight of my hidden turmoil. Her hand reached for mine, a lifeline amidst the chaos. "We'll figure it out," she assured, her words a fragile promise. But how could one unravel the threads of an enigma woven so intricately into the fabric of reality? Time, in its relentless cycle, marched on. I became obsessed, poring over every detail of our lives in search of a clue, a hint of the anomaly. Every morning I meticulously noted the patterns, the subtle nuances that repeated with unwavering loyalty. I turned our home into a shrine of notes and diagrams, desperately trying to decode the sequence of events that bound me. As the days looped, they began to diverge in subtle, unnerving ways. Ethan's laughter seemed hollow, and Sarah's humming took on an eerie, unfamiliar tune. Shadows in the house grew longer, creeping into corners they never reached before. The once comforting familiarity of our lives twisted into a landscape of dread. I was haunted by the feeling that I was not alone in my awareness. More than once, I caught Sarah's expression shifting, a fleeting glimpse of recognition crossing her features before she masked it with a smile. It was as if she too walked the tightrope of this endless cycle, yet her silence clung to resolve, perhaps a denial of our shared reality. One evening, I stumbled upon something both terrifying and oddly comforting. In the attic, amidst a sea of forgotten boxes, I found an old, dust-laden journal. The pages crinkled under my touch, the ink faded yet legible. It was filled with entries, dated and detailed, chronicling days much like my own. Someone before me had lived through this same loop, their words echoing my thoughts, an account of hope, despair, and resignation. The discovery was a revelation. I wasn't alone in this temporal prison. Others had walked this path, each leaving behind their mark, their silent cries for release. The entries hinted at an origin, a moment where time splintered into this repetitive nightmare, yet the specifics remained tantalizingly out of reach. Empowered by the knowledge left behind, I dived deeper into the past, determined to unearth the seed of our entrapment. Each clue, however small, became a beacon guiding me closer to the truth. The journal's author spoke of a decision, a crossroads where choices had ripple effects beyond comprehension. The climax of my journey came on a storm-laden night, the sky crackling with electricity as nature mirrored the turmoil within. I sat in the dining room, the journal open before me, piecing together the fragments of time. The air crackled with anticipation, the house a silent witness to what was about to unfold. I realized that the loop was a manifestation of regret, a cosmic consequence of a choice left unmade, a decision that altered the fabric of our lives. Time demanded reconciliation, a resolution to the unresolved. The journal hinted at forgiveness, at a confrontation with the self, where the past met the present in a dance of closure. I closed my eyes, and for the first time, instead of resisting, I surrendered. I let the loop wash over me, embracing the familiar rhythm. I turned to Sarah, who watched me with an understanding that transcended words. We held each other, a silent pact of unity against the temporal tide. Morning came, yet something felt inexplicably different. The air was lighter, the world around me pregnant with possibilities. The loop had shifted, the cycle broken by the simple act of acceptance. The sun rose, casting golden light across the neighborhood, and for the first time in weeks, I felt the pull of a new day, untouched by the shadow of repetition. But the fear lingered, a specter on the edge of consciousness. The knowledge that time could bend and trap, that reality was fragile and easily shattered into disarray, stayed with me. The loop, though broken, left an indelible mark, a reminder that the world was a tapestry woven with both light and shadows, and that sometimes the darkest paths lead to the brightest dawns. The day began as any other, and the gentle hum of normalcy enveloped the house on Maple Street. The sun filtered in through the lace curtains, casting dappled patterns on the wooden floor. I was sitting at the small kitchen table, sipping a cup of freshly brewed coffee, relishing the quietude that came with the dawn. The neighborhood was just stirring, a few cars pulling out of driveways, and the distant chatter of children walking to school drifted through the open window. It was a peaceful, predictable morning, the kind I had come to cherish. The house itself was an unassuming two-story building, painted in soft pastels that seemed to meld with the sky. I had lived here for nearly a decade, finding comfort in the routine it offered. Each room held memories, layers upon layers of moments that defined my life in the suburbs. Yet, there was always a part of me that marveled at the tranquility, as if it were too perfect, too serene to be entirely real. As I finished my coffee, I heard the faint chime of the doorbell. Odd, I thought. It was too early for visitors. Leaving my cup behind, I made my way to the door, each step echoing slightly in the silent hallway. When I opened it, I was greeted not by a person, but by a small, unmarked package resting on the doorstep. Curiosity piqued, I glanced up and down the street, but found no sign of who might have left it. Bringing the package inside, I set it on the kitchen table and hesitated. It was wrapped in plain brown paper, no address or indication of its origin. Unease crept in, a whisper of something not quite right. But dismissing the feeling as irrational, I unwrapped the package to reveal a small, intricately carved wooden box. The craftsmanship was exquisite, yet there was something unsettling about it. I gingerly opened the box and found a letter, written in an elegant flowing script. The message was brief, but its content sent a chill down my spine. Every choice you make brings you closer to the inevitable. Choose wisely, for each day may be your last. A sense of dread settled over me, heavy and suffocating. I couldn't shake off the feeling that the words held a truth far beyond their cryptic nature. I spent the day trying to ignore the ominous warning, engaging in the mundane tasks of daily life. But the thought lingered at the back of my mind, like a shadow that refused to dissipate. As the day unfolded, the normal rhythm of life seemed to fray at the edges. My phone rang, and when I answered, there was only static on the other end. The television flickered, images blurring and distorting momentarily, though I quickly attributed it to a faulty connection. Yet each small anomaly seemed to weave into a larger pattern, a tapestry of unease that wrapped itself around me. By evening, the feeling of being watched, of something looming just out of sight, had grown too strong to ignore. I found myself checking the locks on doors and windows repeatedly, as if to barricade against an invisible threat. That night, as I lay in bed, sleep eluded me. My mind was a cacophony of thoughts, each more irrational than the last. Eventually, exhaustion claimed me, and I drifted into an uneasy slumber. When I awoke, the world was as it had been the previous day, the sun casting its gentle light over the room. Relief washed over me, and I almost laughed at my foolishness. The letter was surely some prank, a misguided attempt to instill fear. Reassured, I went about my morning routine, pushing the strangeness of the previous day to the recesses of my mind. But the illusion of normalcy shattered when I stepped outside. The same package, identical in every detail, lay on the doorstep. My heart pounded in my chest as I picked it up, the sense of déjà vu overwhelming. Inside, the same carved box, the same letter, the same warning. Panic gripped me as I frantically searched for answers. I retraced my steps, trying to break free from the cycle that seemed to ensnare me. Each day unfolded just as the last, a loop that closed tightly around my reality. The package would appear every morning, the letter a constant reminder of the strange, inexorable force that controlled my fate. As the days turned into weeks, my attempts to escape the loop grew increasingly desperate. I sought help, tried to explain my predicament to friends and neighbors, but was met with skepticism and concern for my well-being. No one believed me, and gradually, they distanced themselves, leaving me isolated in my torment. The house that had once been a haven now felt like a cage, each room a reminder of my entrapment. I tried leaving, packing a bag and driving aimlessly, but something always drew me back. It was as if the world beyond the house ceased to exist, the boundaries of my reality constrained to the confines of Maple Street. In the solitude of those endless days, I began to notice subtle changes in the environment, shifts in the fabric of my perceived normalcy. The shadows in the corners of the rooms seemed to deepen, flickering with a life of their own. Mirrors reflected not just my image, but a fractured, distorted version of myself, as though mocking my plight. It was during one such day, when despair and confusion threatened to overwhelm me, that I saw it. A figure, indistinct and ethereal, hovering just beyond the periphery of my vision. It was as if the air itself had taken form, a wraith-like presence that exuded a palpable aura of malevolence. It was there, watching, waiting, a silent specter that seemed to revel in my helplessness. The entity never spoke, never moved beyond its shadowy confines, yet its presence filled the house, an omniscient sentinel overseeing the unraveling of my sanity. I realized then that it was the source of the loop, the force that held me captive in this relentless cycle of repetition. The choices I made were mere illusions, each path leading inexorably back to the beginning, a perpetual spiral of futility. As days merged into an indistinct blur, a grim resignation settled over me. I understood that the entity sought something beyond my comprehension, a decision or action that eluded me. The letter's warning, veiled in ambiguity, hinted at a choice that held the power to break the cycle. But what choice, and how to make it? In the depths of my despair, I contemplated surrendering to the inevitable, to embrace the end that seemed destined for me. Yet, a flicker of defiance burned within, a refusal to succumb to the whims of the specter that haunted my existence. I resolved to confront it, to challenge the force that manipulated my fate. Summoning every ounce of courage, I stood before the mirror one morning, the carved box clasped tightly in my hands. The entity materialized, a shifting silhouette that loomed behind me in the glass. Its presence was suffused with an ancient power, a silent authority that defied comprehension. "I know you're watching," I whispered, my voice steady despite the fear that clutched at my heart. "What do you want from me?" The reflection twisted, and for the first time, I saw something akin to recognition in its depths. The entity seemed to ripple, as if acknowledging my question, though it remained silent. Yet, I sensed a subtle shift, a change in the air, as though the balance had tipped ever so slightly. Emboldened, I pressed on, speaking not just to the entity, but to the universe itself, appealing to whatever force governed the strange loop of my life. "I refuse to be your pawn," I declared, my voice rising with conviction. "I will find a way to end this." The entity recoiled, its form dissipating into nothingness, leaving me alone with my resolve. Though the loop persisted, though the days continued to repeat with unyielding regularity, I felt a newfound strength within me, a determination to unravel the mystery of my predicament. As another cycle began, I approached the package with renewed purpose. This time, as I opened the box, I noticed something different. A faint carving on the inside lid, symbols that seemed to pulse with an energy of their own. I studied them intently, feeling a strange connection to the markings, a sense of familiarity that eluded explanation. The symbols, I realized, were a key, a map of sorts that hinted at a path through the labyrinth of time. They spoke of choices, of decisions made and unmade, a dance of fate and free will intertwined. It was a puzzle, a riddle that demanded to be solved. And so, armed with this newfound knowledge, I set about deciphering the enigma that had ensnared me. Each day became a step in a journey of discovery, a quest to understand the nature of my captivity. The entity watched, a silent observer to my progress, its presence a constant reminder of the stakes at hand. As days turned to nights, the symbols began to reveal their secrets, guiding me toward a truth that lay hidden beneath the surface of my reality. I realized that the loop was not merely a prison, but a test, a crucible through which I was forged anew. Each repetition was an opportunity, a chance to alter the course of events, to find the elusive answer that would set me free. In the stillness of a midnight hour, as the shadows deepened and the house held its breath, I pieced together the final threads of the puzzle. The decision, the choice that the letter had alluded to, was clear. A leap of faith, a step into the unknown that defied logic and reason. Standing before the mirror, the carved box open in my hands, I prepared to make my choice. The entity appeared once more, its form shifting and unfocused, as if awaiting the outcome with bated breath. With a steady hand, I reached inside the box, feeling the cool surface of a hidden compartment. Within lay a small, ancient key, its metal worn and tarnished with age. I took a deep breath, knowing that this was it, the moment that would determine my fate. With a swift motion, I turned the key in an imagined lock, a symbolic gesture that resonated through the air. a fracture in the continuum of time. The room seemed to ripple, the walls bending and warping around me, as if reality itself acknowledged my defiance. In that moment, I felt a profound sense of release, of liberation from the cycle that had bound me for so long. The entity faded, its presence dissolving into the ether, leaving me alone with the silence of the house. As the dawn broke, the sun casting its golden light over the world, I realized that the loop had ended. The cycle was broken, the choice made, and I was free. Yet, the memory of the ordeal lingered, a shadow etched into my soul, a reminder of the fragility of time and existence. Though I had escaped the loop, the fear remained, a lingering dread that whispered of the unknown, of the forces that lay beyond the veil of reality. I knew that the specter of the supernatural entity would forever haunt the edges of my perception, a silent watcher in the shadows of my mind. But I had learned to live with the fear, to embrace it as a part of me. For in the end, it was my choices, my defiance, that had shaped my destiny. And as I stepped into the new day, I carried with me the knowledge that even in the face of the inexplicable, there is always a choice, a path to be forged, a story to be written anew. It's strange how the scent of nostalgia can sometimes mask the stench of decay. I stood before the crumbling edifice of the Hawthorne House, a testament to bygone grandeur, now withering beneath the weight of time and neglect. The once proud manor exuded an eerie charm, its sagging roof and boarded windows whispering stories of opulence and ruin. The surrounding garden, choked with tangled weeds and wild growth, encroached on the stone pathway like insistent memories that refused to be forgotten. This place, this forsaken shell of a home, was my refuge and my prison. I grew up in its shadow, a child of the neighborhood, drawn to its mysteries like a moth to a flame. The local lore painted it as haunted, a narrative I embraced with the fervor of youth. My friends and I would dare each other to sneak in, to tempt fate and the supposed spirits that roamed its halls. As I stood there now, years later, a familiar chill crept up my spine. A chill not from fear, but from the weight of knowledge, knowledge of the past and what it would soon demand of me. It was a letter, of all things, that began the unraveling of my reality. An ink-stained envelope slipped under my door one rainy morning, addressed in a script that seemed ancient yet familiar. It bore no return address, just a single, ominous sentence. In 8 days, you will awaken in 1999. I dismissed it as a prank, some misguided attempt to unsettle me as Halloween approached. But the words lingered, gnawing at the edges of my mind. Days passed, each one bringing with it a mounting sense of disquiet. My dreams were plagued by visions of the past, scenes I had long buried. I saw myself younger, recklessly wandering the corridors of the Hawthorne House, my laughter echoing through its empty rooms. Yet these dreams always ended the same way. The sound of shattering glass, a scream, and a descent into darkness. Upon waking, the sensation of being watched, of being tethered to something beyond comprehension, was palpable. As the 8th day loomed, I was drawn to the Hawthorne house once more. Its oppressive silence was a stark contrast to the turmoil within me. I wandered through its neglected rooms, each step accompanied by the creaks and groans of protest from the aged floorboards. It was then that I encountered the stranger, a man standing amidst the decay, seemingly out of place, yet undeniably part of the fabric of this haunted abode. His face was obscured by shadow, but his presence was as solid as the walls surrounding us. He spoke with a voice that resonated through the air, a voice both comforting and alien. "You have seen this before," he said, gesturing to the house around us. "You will see it again." Confusion and fear battled within me. "Who are you?" I demanded, my voice a mere whisper against the vast emptiness. "An echo," he replied enigmatically, "a guide through what was and what will be. You are caught in a loop, tethered to a moment you must relive." His words were as cryptic as the letter, yet they stirred something deep within, a recognition, an acceptance of the impossible. As I tried to grasp his meaning, the world around me seemed to shift, the air vibrating with a strange energy. The sensation was dizzying, like standing on the precipice of a forgotten memory, poised to fall backwards into its depths. Then, without warning, the ground gave way. I was plunged into a void, a swirling maelstrom of light and sound that seemed to stretch on for eternity. Through the chaos, fragments of my past flashed before me. Familiar faces, long-forgotten moments, the sound of my own laughter blending with the distant echoes of the Hawthorne house. I was suspended between time, a solitary traveler on a road without end. When the world finally solidified around me, I found myself standing in a room I hadn't seen in years. The wallpaper, faded but still discernible, bore the floral patterns of a different era. Sunlight streamed through the window, casting gentle beams on the dust-laden floor. It was 1999, and I was once again in the Hawthorne house on the cusp of that fateful day. Panic surged through me, a visceral reaction to the impossibility of my situation. But beneath the fear, a sense of resolve began to form. I was here for a reason, to understand, to alter the course of a day that had haunted me for so long. The stranger's words echoed in my mind, a reminder of the loop I was destined to experience. I retraced my steps, moving through the house with the familiarity of a ghost retracing its haunt. Each room was a tableau of memories, each corridor a path I had walked before. My younger self, oblivious to the gravity of the moment, was somewhere in these halls, a specter of innocence about to collide with the harsh reality of consequence. As the day unfolded, I watched with a mix of dread and anticipation. My younger self, unaware of the impending tragedy, played with the reckless abandon of youth. But now I saw things differently. The subtle shifts in light, the creaks of the house, the shadows that seemed to pulse with life. They were all pieces of a puzzle I had never fully comprehended. The climax came as it always did. The sound of breaking glass, a scream, and the sickening realization of what was to come. But this time, I was ready. I reached out through the layers of time, an observer no longer content to be passive. I couldn't change the past, not entirely, but I could guide it. nudge it away from the brink of disaster. I found him, the younger me, teetering on the edge of a decision that would shape the years to come. The air was charged with the inevitability of choice. In that moment, I became the stranger, the guide, the echo. I whispered words of caution, urging him to listen, to heed the warnings he could not yet understand. The impact of my intervention was subtle, a ripple through the fabric of time. But it was enough. The path diverted, veered away from the precipice I had feared. As the day waned, the oppressive weight of the house seemed to lift, its shadows less menacing, its silence less foreboding. When I awoke, it was with the sensation of having emerged from a deep sleep. The Hawthorne house stood before me, unchanged, yet somehow different. The past had not been rewritten, but its burden was lighter, its repercussions not as severe. The loop had been broken, or at least altered, and the ghost of that day no longer held sway over my present. Yet, as I departed from the house, I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. The stranger's presence lingered, a reminder of the unseen forces that guide us, of the threads that bind us to our past. I knew now that time was not a linear path, but a tapestry woven with moments of choice and consequence. And so, the fear remained, a quiet echo in the recesses of my mind. Not the fear of what had been, but the fear of what lay ahead. For if time could be altered, if the past could reach out and touch the present, then what of the future? I carried this with me, a constant companion, a ghost of uncertainty that would haunt me in the days to come. With each step away from the Hawthorne house, the world seemed less solid, less sure. I was free from the loop, yet tethered to the haunting knowledge that the boundaries of reality were not as rigid as I once believed. The past, I learned, was a living thing, a shadow that followed, always whispering, always watching. The house stood at the edge of the small town, its paint weathered and the shutters creaking with the slightest breeze. It was the kind of place people drove past, without a second glance, its history buried under layers of neglect and forgetfulness. To me, though, it was home, a cocoon of familiarity in a world I had come to find increasingly alien. I had moved here years ago, seeking solitude after a life of restless wandering and half-remembered dreams. The townspeople were kind enough, nodding in acknowledgement when I passed them in the street, but mostly leaving me to my own devices, respecting my need for isolation. Life settled into a routine. I would rise early, make myself a simple breakfast of toast and tea, then spend the day reading or tending to the small garden in the back. The house was quiet, save for the gentle ticking of the grandfather clock in the hallway and the occasional groan of the old wooden floorboards. I took comfort in these sounds, reminders that despite its aging structure, the house was very much alive. It was during one of these mundane mornings that the first disturbance occurred. I had been working in the garden, my hands stained with soil, when I heard a soft whisper, barely audible over the rustling leaves. I paused, straining to hear more clearly, but the whispering ceased, leaving me to wonder if it had been the wind or some trick of my mind. I dismissed it as nothing, and continued with my gardening, though a nagging unease lingered. The whisper followed me into the house later that day, a faint murmur that seemed to drift in and out of hearing. I found myself standing in the middle of the living room, turning slowly on my heel, trying to pinpoint the source, but the house remained silent as ever, its secrets tightly held. The nights were the worst. Lying in bed, the darkness would press in from all sides, and I would feel an inexplicable urge to look under the bed. It was a compulsion I fought with every fiber of my being, holding my breath until it passed. I told myself it was childish, ridiculous even, to fear what lay beneath, but the urge persisted, growing stronger each night until sleep became a battle I was losing. Days turned into weeks, and the whispers grew bolder. They were no longer confined to certain corners of the house, but followed me everywhere, a constant, unnerving presence. I began to lose time, entire hours slipping away without notice. I would find myself standing in unfamiliar rooms, not remembering how I had gotten there, my mind blank and buzzing with static. I sought solace in the garden, hoping the open air would clear my thoughts, but the whispers found me there too, coiling around my mind like smoke. The townspeople noticed my change in demeanor, their polite nods becoming wary glances, though none dared to ask what troubled me. I was grateful for their silence, unable to articulate the fear gnawing at my sanity. One evening, as dusk settled in, I found myself standing in the hallway, staring at the grandfather clock. Its rhythmic ticking had become a metronome to my madness, each second marked with a dread I could not shake. The whispers were louder now, filling the air with a cacophony of incomprehensible voices. I covered my ears, but the sound was inside me, vibrating against my skull like 1,000 wasps. I moved through the house in a trance, each room a blur until I reached my bedroom. The compulsion to look under the bed was overwhelming, a physical force pulling me down. I hesitated, my heart thundering in my chest, and then slowly, deliberately, I lowered myself to the floor. The space beneath the bed was dark, a void that seemed to swallow the light. I held my breath, inching closer until I could make out the vague outline of something hidden in the shadows. It was a box, old and covered in a thick layer of dust. My hand trembled as I reached for it, fingers brushing against its rough surface. As I pulled it into the light, a sense of déjà vu washed over me, as though I had done this before, countless times, in some half-forgotten past. The box was locked, but the key was on the nightstand, a key I had never noticed until now. It fit perfectly, the lock clicking open with a soft, final note. Inside, I found papers and photographs, yellowed with age, the images faded but still recognizable. They were pictures of me, or at least someone who looked like me, standing in front of this very house. But the dates were all wrong, the clothes too old-fashioned. Among the papers was a letter, the ink smudged but legible. It was addressed to me, or rather, to the person I once was, before the amnesia, before the whispers. The letter spoke of secrets buried deep within the house, of memories locked away for my own protection. It warned of the dangers of looking too closely, of remembering what was meant to be forgotten. The realization hit me like a tidal wave, crashing over every barrier I had erected in my mind. I had lived this life before, countless times, with each cycle ending in the same madness, the same fear. The house was a prison, a perpetual loop of confusion and dread. The whispers were not external, but echoes of my own lost memories, fragments of a past I had chosen to erase. The truth was unbearable, and yet I could not look away. I had to know what lay beneath the surface, what I had hidden so carefully from myself. I reached further into the box, pulling out more photographs, each one a piece of the puzzle that was my life. Faces and places blurred together, forming a mosaic of forgotten experiences and emotions. All at once, the whispers coalesced into a single voice, clear and resonant, speaking the words I had feared most. Remember. The room spun, and I staggered back, clutching the box to my chest as the memories surged forward. A torrent of images and sensations that threatened to drown me. I saw myself as a child, exploring the hidden corners of the house, my curiosity insatiable and dangerous. I saw the faces of the people who had come before, each one a victim of the house's insidious charm, their lives consumed by its secrets. The climax came with a clarity so profound, it bordered on revelation. The house was more than wood and stone. It was a living entity, feeding on the fears and forgotten dreams of those who dwelled within its walls. It had claimed me as its own, weaving my life into its tapestry of despair. I wanted to escape, to flee from the house and its relentless grasp, but I knew in my heart that it was too late. The cycle would continue, my memories reset, and I would awaken once more without knowledge of what had come before. The house would see to that, its hunger insatiable, its power absolute. With the last vestiges of my will, I returned the box to its place beneath the bed, knowing that it would remain there, waiting for the next iteration, the next me, who would stumble upon its secrets and begin the cycle anew. I lay down on the bed, exhaustion pulling me into a restless sleep, the whispers now silent, their purpose fulfilled. The lingering fear was the worst part, a shadow that clung to the edges of my consciousness even as I drifted into slumber. I knew I would forget, that the house would devour my memories and leave me empty, but the fear would remain, a seed planted deep within my soul, ready to sprout when the time was right. And so I slept, knowing that the house would watch over me, its presence a constant reminder of the unknown lurking beneath the surface of my mind. I had looked under the bed, and in doing so, had glimpsed a fraction of the truth, but it was a truth I could never fully embrace. The cycle would begin again, and I would awaken to a world both familiar and strange, haunted by whispers of a past I could not remember.